Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us. A special welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. Before we dive into today's content, just wanted to give a couple of reminders for those who may not have listened in a while. We're just doing audio now. We've returned to our roots. We are going to be producing some video-based content on special occasions, so be on the lookout for some of that. You are now, for the first time, you're hearing some ads. You probably heard ads before you heard my voice. You will probably hear them in the middle and again at the end. So just to give people a little bit of a heads up about what you can expect on the show as we are pivoting and moving into sort of a new era for the World of UX podcast. So let's go ahead. Without further ado, we're going to dive right in tonight, and we are continuing our series entitled The Harsh Realities of UX Maturity, where I've been talking about aspects of UX maturity that people don't think about, don't understand, are not getting any coverage at all because of the way that we traditionally learn about UX maturity, how that usually people think that it just applies to the organization. And as you've heard already, there's a lot of different moving parts. There's a lot of different things, aspects of the discipline of the work that UX applies to. And I hope that this is also helping give people a greater sense of understanding of what UX is all about. Some people limit it to visual design, doing some type of interface design, and that's it. People don't think about the psychological elements. People don't think about the managing of politics. People don't think about the relationship management, the relationship building. There are so many different aspects of UX that don't get any coverage. They don't get covered in school for the most part. They don't get covered when you go to conferences for the most part. There are a lot of missing pieces, a lot of things that don't get covered. I'm trying to shed light on those things because these are realities that when you do the work, you're going to come across these things, and knowing these things and making it a point to manage them is a tremendous help if you're going to work in this arena. So just trying to call these things out. And in this particular segment, this is part 2, where I've been talking about UX maturity and the illusion of speed. And by way of very brief recap, I talked about how last week we defined speed. A lot of times people think about speed from the perspective of just how fast you get the work done. But as we illustrated last week, it's about a whole lot more than that. People usually think that speed means to go fast. They think it means to deliver fast solutions. They think that it has to do with resolving customer concerns quickly. And those are aspects of speed. Yes, we know that those are stereotypical elements associated with speed. But number one, we need to understand that speed, the perception of speed, I should say, is a UX maturity issue. You've got stereotypical, traditional speed, but then there's a mature way to look at speed. And when you think about speed from a holistic perspective, you're going to be in a better position to bring value. You're going to be in a better position to help to meet everybody's needs and drive and manage the perception of the value that you are bringing to the organization and to yourself as an individual. We talked about software development life cycles. We talked about waterfall. We talked about agile. We talked about iterative. Yeah, there is an SDLC called iterative. There's a V model. We talked about that. And we talked about how understanding those things is key. And we talked about what speed means in conjunction with each one of those software development life cycles. We talked about how speed began. It really started to kick into gear when it came to things like lean UX, when it came to things like agile. People want to move fast, fail fast. They talked about minimum viable product. All of these things are associated with speed. But folks, if you move fast and you don't have validation, you create tech debt. Talked about that last week. If you're operating as a startup, yeah, speed comes into play. And by the way, 1 out of every 10 startups fails. And if you're not a startup and you operate like a startup, that's a recipe for failure. We talked about that a bit last week. failing fast. That's what we talk about when it came to Agile, when it talked about people talked about going fast. Failing fast, however, it could be indicative of a UX maturity problem. And we got into that a little bit last week. And when viability, the part of MVP, minimum viable product, a lot of people mention minimum viable product, but they don't define it and they don't pursue it the right way. And so when viability becomes a moving target, the product is going to suffer, the business is going to suffer, and the UX team is going to suffer. So we covered all of that last week. How's that for, speaking of speed, how's that for fast? And just a little bit more by way of recap. How a person or team operates is in and of itself a reflection of UX maturity. The perception of speed is a UX maturity issue. We mentioned that again last week. Really, really key. We need to understand, folks, if you're moving fast, but you're not doing it from the perspective of an understanding, of addressing the work from a perspective of understanding, I should say, if you're not mitigating risk, mitigating error while you're moving fast, you are creating additional work. You are taking risks that the business cannot afford to take. There's a lot of issues associated with that. Folks, you have UX maturity pluses. We mentioned those last week. Heuristics helps you to go faster. It helps you to be more direct, and it helps you to have concrete goals in mind because you're trying to design in conjunction with the best practices, with the common conventions, with those proven principles. That's what heuristics are all about, which a lot of people doing UX, especially coming in, they either don't know what heuristics are, or they have a very small personal heuristics repository, so they can't use the heuristics. And so they can't align the work they're doing with the heuristics. There's a lot of spaghetti slinging at that point. There's a lot of spitballing. And so it looks like you're moving fast, hence the mirage of speed, but you're really not. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. So heuristics will help you. You want to make sure that you're digesting mental models, understand what the users need. You understand what moves the needle from them when it comes to satisfaction and delight. When you understand patterns and know what patterns to use and when to use them, that's what design systems are about when they're done right. For a lot of people, frankly, folks, design systems is just a way for certain people to have a seat in UX. They really don't care about the things I'm talking about. And so again, you've got a UX maturity problem when you're not doing things the right way. You optimize your research prep. Yes, from a speed perspective, you design things the right way. You know what to do research on, what not to do research on. You don't ground yourself in customer sentiment and then leave performance associated metrics off of the radar. That's just doing research for the sake of research. It's not genuine research, and it doesn't generate the findings and the benefits that research is supposed to generate. So yes, some people they're just hamsters. We'll be talking about that soon as well. It also, when you do things the right way, UX maturity is in place. You're trying to drive understanding about micro experiences. And if you don't know how to do that, I mentioned how that you should engage from a task and a needs analysis perspective. And when you dissect tasks step by step, which is where a lot of experiences break down, where you have a lot of problems, when you do that, you're focusing on those things. It helps you to truly go fast because you're not doubling back. It helps you to, again, in a very direct way, think about in the old school from a travel perspective. Here comes another metaphor. It used to be years ago, if you were taking a trip on the road, you would go to some travel agency and you'd let them know where you're going to go. They would create a trip ticket for you. Basically, it's a map. You know exactly where you're going to go. We just go online and we do these kinds of things in Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever your favorite map solution is today. You tell it where your start point is, you tell it where your destination is, and then it gives you a turn-by-turn set of directions. It lets you know what your ETA is, all of those things. We are supposed to do the same thing when we're doing design work. All the UX maturity pluses I just mentioned, heuristics, understanding mental models, pattern awareness, optimizing research prep, understanding micro experiences. When we have these things in place, that we accomplish the same things we would do with a triptych. We know where we're going. We have identified all of those milestones associated with driving wins for the design process. Folks, this is what UX is about. It's not about getting together and just throwing together an interface. That's not what UX is. That's what posers do. That's what retrofits do. That's what upstarts do, because they don't understand any of the things that I'm talking about. Worse, they don't want to understand the things that I'm talking about. So these are the things that drive wins for us. So that's all by way of recap. As we move forward, the first thing I want to get into as we advance on this topic has to do with the cons and the challenges. What happens when you don't have the UX maturity elements in place? When you don't know how to proceed, when you don't know how to execute the steps, the various elements, the principles associated with what I commonly call pure UX, when those things are not in place, there are other things that happen. Number one, you get into order taking. You get into a situation where people think that all UXers are supposed to do is do what they're told. That cannot be further from the truth. Now, we may have an initiative, we may have goals, we may have projects, but folks, UX is a science. And a lot of people doing it today don't understand that. A lot of people who are stakeholders don't understand that. A lot of people teaching it don't understand that. User experience is a science. And when you're doing the work, yeah, there's some art involved, but holistically speaking, UX is a science. It is an infinite science that requires us to have our head on a swivel. It is an infinite science that requires us to constantly engage from the perspective of critical thinking, so we can take a lot of different things into consideration and be ready to pivot when the data dictates that we pivot. All those things said, if somebody just tells you, oh, go and just put this screen together, go and do this for me, jump into Figma and do X. That's not what UX is. That's a visual designer. Visual designers take orders. Now, they may exercise a bit of creativity in the midst of that, but they're still taking orders. I've actually seen people say, I don't like this part of UX. I want to be creative. Then you can go back to the world of visual design, because we're problem solvers over here. We're trying to find the sweet spot between user needs, business needs, and constraints. And so that's what UX work is about. We're not here. We're not like the waiter in the restaurant that comes and somebody says, well, I'll have this steak well done, or I'll have this roasted eggplant and I want it seasoned like this and cooked like that. No, that's not what UX is. When UX maturity is high, we don't take orders. Somebody can give a request and we respect the request and we understand the request, but we have to understand what the business needs actually are. We need to understand what people are actually trying to accomplish, and then we're going to let you know how to accomplish that and where to insert the appropriate UX principles to achieve the wins that we're trying to attain. But order taking is not it. And order taking is not ethical. There's a lot of people occupying space in UX today that are taking orders. That's not the ethical way to proceed. There's a problem with that. There's malpractice associated with that approach. And we need to understand that today. That thing being said, point number two with these cons and challenges, if somebody is not attaining or demonstrating, embracing, not capable of operating within a certain level of UX maturity, they will be more focused on the UI, the user interface, the GUI, the graphical user interface, than they are on the actual UX work, than the user flows and things of that nature, the cognitive load, the readability, the scannability, the semiotics, those elements. They'll just be looking at trying to put together a user interface, which is another reason why when people go into some of these artificial intelligence tools just to throw together an interface and they think they're doing UX work, that couldn't be further from the truth. That's not UX, it's UI. This remind me too, somebody mentioned, I had a conversation with somebody Shout out to that individual. I love what they're doing. I love their passion, things of that nature. They just said something that really interested me. They said, yeah, I think I've seen you before. Weren't you on YouTube talking about complaining about UI? Quick news for anybody out there. If you think that I'm complaining, frankly, that's a defense mechanism. Somebody doesn't like what I'm saying, so they begin to frame what I'm saying in a way that will cause people to become defensive or to turn off. I'm educating, and so I'm not a complainer. The people who say I'm complaining, they just don't like what I'm saying, or they don't like the fact that I'm saying it. And it's interesting that things that I've been saying over the years, I'm starting to see and hear people talk about the same things, and people are accepting it. They're saying the same exact thing because they're finally coming to the realization. They refused to hear me when I was saying it. Now they've arrived at the point that they have no choice but to accept that what I said was true, but they don't want to give me credit for having said it. They want to take credit for having said it. And so now they're trying to act like the light bulb is on for them, and they're acting like they're sharing this discovery. They want to share it with the people and do everybody a favor. I've been talking about all of this stuff for years, and folks were hiding from it or saying that I was complaining when actually I was educating. Let's drop that. And we're going to be talking about this soon too. So we talked about this, as a matter of fact, some time ago during the Sinister series. We talked about the fact that people talk about these UX boogeymen. There are no UX boogeymen. People try to say that there's boogeymen because they don't want you to listen to the person that they're presenting as a boogeyman. So just a little pause for the cause on that, folks. UI and UX are two different things. UI is either a visual design element that is completely separate from UX, or it's under the umbrella of UX, and it is a very small part under that umbrella. So I've been saying it for years. I'm saying it again. When people get out there and try to paint a picture or frame what I'm saying in a way that misrepresents what I'm saying and doing, I'm not going to let them get away with that. And so just putting that out there and make sure that people understand that. But number 3, under cons and challenges. So again, we had the danger of order taking and being UI focused. Both are reflective of having low UX maturity. Number 3 for tonight has to do with dysfunctional expectations. When UX maturity is not enjoined, applied, demonstrated, embraced, when it's not understood, when it's not on display, there will be dysfunctional expectations associated with the work. It is our job as UX practitioners to make sure that people have a proper set of expectations when it comes to the work that's being done. I was talking to somebody a week ago about a situation that I experienced in my past, several times in the past, actually, where you pick up work where somebody else left off. And if that person that was doing the work before you was operating at a lower level of UX maturity, the people that you are starting to work with, your stakeholders that you inherit, will have dysfunctional expectations about what you are supposed to do. When you inherit work from someone else and someone expects visual design, that's dysfunctional. When you inherit work from someone else and they just think, well, he would always just go together and just put together screens. Can't you just put together screens? No, we're not here to do that. Can't you work just really, really, really fast? And we really have to do all this? Do we really have to do any research? No, that's not how we proceed. So dysfunctional expectations, again, are a reflection of UX maturity. And in the case where I have experienced that in my career, now I've got to go back and I've got to help to try to drive more maturity with the expectations of the people that I'm doing the work with, because I can't do real UX work if the stakeholders have dysfunctional expectations. It just isn't going to work. And now we just add it to the timeline. Now we just created some problems. So it is our responsibility as UX practitioners to manage expectations and set them the right way. And some UXers are afraid to do that because they know or they think there's going to be a backlash. They don't want to experience the backlash. So they'd rather take orders and are not considering the fallout or the consequences of the order taking. And there's a ton of them, and that needs to be a show all by itself. And speaking of the dysfunctional expectations, number 4 for tonight has to do with managing stakeholders. You have to manage stakeholders. You have to manage the relationships. And if you have higher UX maturity as a practitioner, you are in a better position to manage those stakeholders, expectations, relationships, timeline, commitment, all of these things. Managing stakeholders is critical. Now, what comes to mind is, Darren, you're always talking about what we need to do, and you don't tell us how to do it. That will come later. We don't have time to do all of these things. That's another one of those things where people frame things the wrong way. Anytime you're learning something, you only learn a part at a time. If you understand that managing stakeholders is key, frankly, and you're an adult, you will figure out how to manage stakeholders without me telling you about it tonight. We'll talk about that another time. That's a topic in and of itself. And it's really funny how the people who have no experience truly educating people always want you to do everything in one fell swoop. There is a cognitive load issue associated with education, folks, for the record. There's a cognitive load issue. If you try to give people too much information at one time, you completely blow it and they end up not getting anything. Some of you have heard about how I'm making lattes at home now. I got a wonderful machine to make lattes, and I've been trying my hand at latte art, and I took a class. And I was just really happy during the class to see how they approached it. It's a 2-hour class. They spent the first hour talking about the concepts, talking about why you do this and why you do that, and sharing all this foundational information, making sure that we understood all of the associated concepts. Then, guess what we did? We went and we practiced. Then they got into the actually doing it. They talked about the foundation. Let me back up. They talked about the foundational elements. Then they told us how we do it, and then we practiced. There were 3 elements: presentation, application, and feedback. I talk about that when we talked about UX education. If you haven't seen that, go on YouTube and look up my talk on the problem with UX education. I am a 6-time certified instructional designer trainer, and that's what my PhD is in. It's in educational leadership. You cannot give people too much information at one time and expect them to learn it. So we're giving you some of the concepts. If you understand the fact that there's a danger in order taking, if you understand that if you're UI focused, that's going to be problematic. You understand that having dysfunctional expectations, or if you're fostering dysfunctional expectations, that means that there's a UX maturity problem. We're understanding that these are things that are going to need our attention. These are things that we need to be able to identify before we take a step further in any direction. We have to understand the truth associated with these things. Managing stakeholders. Do you know how to manage relationships? Are you subscribing to information, or are you subscribing to emotional intelligence? If you do these things, you already know part of the how-to, and you don't need me to tell you that. But I thought I'd take a moment to point these things out because it's problematic. It's problematic, folks, if you think that we're going to give you too much information, because I'm not. And I'm not worried about the critiques of uninformed people or people who have agendas, and I know how to spot them. So at any rate, number 5, when it comes to cons and challenges associated with UX maturity, when UX maturity is not in place, you get the mirage of democratization. You end up with the mindset that anybody can do the work. There's a lot of folks in product circles today who think they can do UX work. And on one hand, you can. There are people who are in UX that are transitioning in the product. I talked to somebody today who said that was the best time they had in their career when they were basically a product manager, but they were doing it from a UX perspective, and they got a lot done, and they said it was extremely fulfilling to do the work that way. So please understand, I'm not saying you can't. You can do that. It might be something I may end up going that route. But there are instances where people think that they can democratize design work. The whole everybody's a designer mindset. When everybody's a designer, folks, you've got problems. Again, UX work is a science. And when you have people who do the UX work who don't understand the science, who don't know the benefits of the science, who cannot navigate the science, who don't have any expertise associated with the science, this whole democratization, this whole everybody's a designer mindset is going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to going to result in lost customers, lost trust. It's going to result in millions and millions of dollars in attrition. It's going to result in a Dunning-Kruger epidemic because people are going to think that they know how to do things that they don't. And I've seen a ton of design work in my career from people who are not designers. And when the informed person, when the expert comes into play and just rips the whole thing apart, people should understand, you know what? I thought I knew what I was doing, but after seeing what that person said, I realized that I don't. We need to put everybody back in the right lanes. We need to organize traffic, the traffic of design, the way that it should be so that we can actually get where we're trying to go. Because, oh yeah, everybody has an opinion, but there's opinion and there's expert opinion. And when expert opinion is replaced by opinion, failure is going to follow. Failure is going to ensue. There's going to be a disaster. Think Titanic, if you will. Democratization is a mirage. And it's interesting how you don't have people all trying to do developer work. You don't have people trying to do the CEO's work. You don't have everybody trying to get together and do work for different people when it comes to different disciplines. But for some reason, you got a bunch of people that are trying to democratize UX design work, and you've got people that are trying to democratize UX research. And both are a crime. They're a crime from a business perspective. You're not going to go to jail, actual physical jail, but your customers are going to put you in a figurative jail by jettisoning your product, by getting rid of your service, by just continually just ejecting you from having a place in the life of their business dealings because you thought that everybody could do the work. It's not true. I mean, I even have a little note here. Beware of Figma Make because of that. Because there's people that think, well, I can just tell Figma Make me what I want. UX is a lot more than that. It takes a lot more to get the work done. And if you think you are, this is going to be like the dot-com bust. And I said that in a recent episode where everybody was running to get on the internet, but they didn't take time to understand it. And so some companies actually lost the shirt off their back. There's a bunch of people in the business world today that weren't even around for the dot-com bust. So they don't even know what that is. They don't know what happened. And it's one thing to read about it and another thing to have seen it. I personally lived through it. So I know what the dot-com bust is about. I help companies recover from the dot-com bust. I help some companies avoid the dot-com bust. There's not a lot of people around today that can say that. And so beware, folks, of order taking as we wrap up today. Beware of being too UI focused. Beware of dysfunctional expectations. Manage it. Beware of not managing your stakeholders. Place value on those relationships. Take the time to understand what is important to them. You want some how-to? Here you go. Here's some of it. Take time to get to know those people. A lot of people see UXers as a threat. A lot of people see UXers as making them irrelevant. There's a lot of marketing people who think that there's a lot of duplication of efforts and purpose when it comes to UX work and when it comes to the work that's happening over in marketing. And there's a lot of people outside of marketing who think that UX is unnecessary. But if you bring the right value, they won't see you that way. So you have to tap into the right information, get the right books, build the right libraries, build the right personalized learning network, the things that will really help you to grow so you can be a sound professional, so you can bring real value. This is not rocket science from that perspective. It's doable, but if you tap into the wrong information or if you put too much confidence in the wrong things and being in yourself or other things that are not appropriate, you're going to create a problem. So manage those stakeholders, manage those relationships, and beware of the mirage of democratization. Everybody's not a designer. I don't care what somebody said. I don't care what expert claimed that. Everybody's not a designer. Everybody's not a researcher. Democratization of research didn't even mean what people think it means. It didn't mean everybody should do the research. It means we should all come together and collaborate when it's time to synthesize the data. Completely different. But you won't hear anybody talk about that, will you? They want to try to put research in everybody's hands. Even some of the tools that are on sale out here, they want to make money. So they're going to say that. They're going to support that. But the truth of the matter is everybody is not X, Y, and Z. So let's be careful. Let's understand that when UX maturity is low, these 5 things become problems. So, folks, in closing, remember to strive to achieve high levels of UX maturity. It's going to bring more value. It drives more respect for the discipline. Indirectly, it drives more job security because you're bringing greater value. And everybody loves value, folks. Remember, it's the job of the UX professional to push back if and when people seek to move fast without reason. It's our job to curtail that. We mitigate risk. We are the voice of reason. We are hubris insurance, everybody. We are hubris insurance. If our stakeholders are seduced by the illusion of speed and we don't offer heuristics, data, and sound reason to discourage the erroneous approach to the business, we are being unethical. We're engaging in malpractice. So we have to be better than that. Remember, speed isn't speed if it prolongs the journey to success between concept and delivery. And in this closing moment, I'm reminded of the words of a person, I won't name this person, but somebody I have the honor of working with. They made a fantastic statement. It's not about speed to production. It's about speed to value. So speed, true speed, mature speed, takes us from that inception point, that starting point, to the point where we're actually bringing value. How fast can you get from the beginning, from the starting line to value? That's the point. That's where we're supposed to be traveling today, folks. And if and when we do that, then we are truly engaging in speed and engaging in speed the right way. So that's it, folks. That's all the time we have for today. Until next week, this is Darren Hood, Dr. Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until next time, happy UXing, everybody.